Joining us now is BYU football assistant head coach Ed Lamb on the Deseret First Credit Union hotline. He's watched a few of his guys that he's coached at linebacker go to the NFL recently, and he's back out on the recruiting trail today. Coach, first and foremost, welcome to the show.
What's up, Ed?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me on. How's it going?
Good. We're good. Where are you right now on the aforementioned recruiting trail?
It's 6:15 in the morning right now where I'm at.
Are you in Hawaii?
I am. I had to step out of the hotel so I wasn't disturbing people through the thin walls.
Wow, that's commitment. How'd you get Hawaii versus the your other assistant coaches?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how that worked. I have some history recruiting the Big Island of Hawaii, not so much on Oahu, but the Big Island. We had some players at Southern Utah. 4 of them come from there. And so that was kind of a niche, and that's actually the island I'm at today. But really, I mean, I think to do it right, and Kalani, of course, wants to take care of the islands, and there's a rich BYU history there. There really should be one recruiter taking care of Oahu, and then all of the other islands combined. I think one guy can handle that. And so that's kind of how we have it set up now, but we also will significantly work by position as the signing date gets closer.
So who tackles Oahu then?
That's Elisa Tuiaki.
Elisa, okay. I can't think of anybody better. It's fantastic, right?
Coach, I think our next question is, have you found the next Ed Lamb for BYU?
Oh, my standards are way higher than that, buddy. We're, I wouldn't be employed for very long if I was out trying to find the next Ed Lambs.
No sinewy white guys in JCs anywhere?
Yeah. Hard-working guys, all effort, no talent. No, I haven't. I haven't called any of those back.
Okay, let's be honest. You're really looking for the next, Fred Warner, Sione Takitaki types, right? And congratulations as his position coach. BYU's one draft pick is Sione, and he does a tremendous job. 3rd round, were you, how did you feel about when he was drafted and who drafted him?
Well, I'm excited about who drafted him because I think it's a young staff, and we know some of those guys, and you guys pay enough attention and watch enough press conferences to know that's a young head coach who's, there's a high energy level there. I think there hasn't been a lot of success in the past, and so I think they're looking for energetic guys that come in and just want to play, and that's Shona. He's ate up with football, and he just eats, sleeps, and dreams football, and I think he'll be fantastic for them. But more importantly, I think it's a great fit, and they'll really appreciate what he brings to the table.
BYU football assistant head coach Ed Lamb joining us from Hawaii as he is recruiting for the next class of BYU Cougars. When you look at what BYU has been able to do in consistently placing linebackers in the NFL, it kind of makes you wonder, how is this happening between Sione and Fred, and then a little before that, Kyle Van Noy? What is it about BYU's program placing those guys in the NFL?
I think BYU has always had a really good niche there at the linebacker position. I think, as we talk about as a staff, we feel like our home base in recruiting. In other words, kids that grow up wanting or considering or being fans of BYU, Utah kids, LDS kids, that's really rich in the front 7 on offense and defense. Offensive, defensive line, linebackers, fullbacks, running backs to some extent, especially the big backs. And traditionally, even back when I was a player here and before in the 80s when BYU was just, ramped up on offense, there were still very good, tough, physical linebacker players, fullbacks, tight ends, and we still feel like that's a huge advantage for us.
Do you feel like for whatever reason there's a certain position that's easier to recruit and maybe one or whatever that's harder to recruit?
Yes, I mean, it's a simple thing. Fast guys show up on track times, and I think we've talked enough before. I'm a real student of high school track times, and that's, I think, one way where we can kind of find maybe some underdeveloped guys and find some fast guys and with length and development potential, hard workers for the skill positions. But if you look at the state of Utah and the number of Division I sprinters that the high schools in Utah are putting out, I mean, by comparison to other states, it's really minuscule. And by comparison to football, I mean, Utah has a really disproportionate share of per capita Division I athletes they're putting out in the sport of football, and in comparison with other states. But track is not one of them. So speed is just not something that the Utah high schools are producing, and it's something where we have to go other places where there's a little more of a speed environment, track environment.
What position do you feel like is easier, like the easiest to recruit? Perhaps it's not easy, but easier.
Yeah, that's a really good question because we're painting with a broad brush right now, right? But I think over time, just kind of thinking of it over a course of a number of years, I think we're going to have more linebackers, defensive linemen, offensive linemen, tight ends, fullbacks that grow up BYU fans. And of course, that's always the easiest, are the ones that we don't have to go and explain to them why it's important for their lifestyle to adhere to the dress and grooming standards and the honor code, and why they need to spend extra time on this application for admission as opposed to other ones, which are just kind of a rubber stamp. We don't have to sell BYU as much to guys who grow up wanting to be Cougars.
Ed Lamb with us on BYU Sports Nation, BYU football assistant head coach. When you see a guy like Sione get drafted into the NFL and you're out recruiting, how does that impact your immediate recruiting pitch to the guys you may be visiting or talking with?
Those guys, and Fred before him, because San Diego is another one of my recruiting areas, and so of course Fred and Troy Warner, for that matter, their names are big down there. But anytime there can be a connection between the coaches or the prospects and what we're doing on the field, it's really easy to talk in those terms. I was just talking with one of the high school coaches here on this island yesterday, and he was asking me if I thought his prospect was like Sione, was like Taktaki. And so that's a really easy talking point at that point. They pay attention to what's going on. Guys like Sione and Fred before him and many others, they just bring more attention to what we're doing and more familiarity.
It's good to be the assistant head coach. You have Hawaii and San Diego? It's amazing, Ed.
You guys are making this sound like it's a power thing. There's no place more beautiful than Provo, Utah in May. I mean, I would rather be home with my family.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can ruin a vacation site like having to go and work there consistently.
That is true. You bring up a good point. I didn't think there could be a complaint about covering Hawaii and San Diego, but you have created that. Nice job. Let's talk about the guys you have coming back. Obviously, Zane Anderson off of an injury and a red shirt, so he's back as a redshirt senior. He graduated. Congratulations to him. Isaiah Kafusi was kind of the surprise, most improved guy on the team. How's their development as they recover from injury and are supposed to be two of those starters?
I just have a really high level of confidence in both of those guys because of the way that they approach the game. And, you said it with Isaiah. He's come so far from, I would say just even 1 year ago, coming out of spring practice sessions just over a year ago, we had no anticipation that he would contribute much meaningfully on game days. And he just continued to work and overcome his personal weaknesses in the game, and he's become a really strong player for us, a great leader. He really works at the game. Zane has tremendous physical ability and got unlucky with an injury last year. He's coming back strong right now, gaining a lot of good, solid muscle mass, and I'm excited about those two guys leading the way.
Ed Lamb with us on BYU Sports Nation. Clearly you have some weapons and options at the outside position. Who's competing for the starting middle linebacker spot?
We had a number of guys in the spring that I thought each showed some ability, some promise, and I still need to work with them, and they still need to develop as players. But Jackson Kalfusi took a lot of the middle linebacker reps. He's a really good change of direction player. He plays with a low center of gravity. He doesn't flinch at all at the point of contact. Trajan Peely is a guy who's been in games, made plays. He's going to be ready to go at whatever position we play him. So we worked him a little bit at middle linebacker just so that we would have the advantage of having somebody who's been in the games, in the tight games, knows what it's like to win and lose and overcome. And then Peyton Wilgar and Max Tooley are two of the younger players that I think we're going to try out a little bit more in fall camp, because we feel like we've got so much depth at the outside linebacker position that one or more of those guys might be well served by training inside as well.
Let's finish with this. Ed, we talk a lot about those first 4 games, which are notable. All Power 5 opponents, 3 of 4 at home. Very exciting. The next 4 is certainly challenging as well. Toledo on the road, at South Florida, Boise State at home, at Utah State. How do you make sure you manage this in a way where not only you can be as healthy as possible, but try and be above 500 and be the best you can be through 8 challenging games?
Yeah, you guys have, I mean, you're students of the game. You've seen this before. There's always, the way that the schedule lines up preseason, and then with the benefit of hindsight, looking back at the end of a season or even in the middle of the season, games just didn't play out the way that you might have thought that they were going to in the preseason. Teams are stronger, matchups are different. Sometimes you have favorable matchups, sometimes unfavorable. There are injuries and just situations that occur even within the game that make some games more challenging than others. So I think a big role of the coaching staff is to make sure that we're focused on what the immediate task at hand is, and that's, in this case, that's game 1, and we're not really concerned about game 2. And our players talk about it. You guys talk about it. There's a first 4. They're all Power 5. That's exciting. It's important for recruiting. But when we get down to business and we're in our meeting rooms and we're talking about preparation and strategy, it's about beat Utah.
I think that's the greatest news that any BYU fan could hear today, Ed. So way to finish on a high note, man.
Hey, thanks for setting it up, man. That was a nice slow pitch softball right there.
Yeah, you got it. And let's give you some karma for your recruiting trip as you power through the Hawaiian Islands.
Because it's so hard, Ed.
You're doing good work, man. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, guys. Great to talk to you. Take care.
Thanks, Ed.
Ed Lamb on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future.